The obsidian command deck of the inevitable Dominion remained silent save for the organic mechanical hum of navigation systems. Admiral Vostar, his carapace bearing the iridescent markings of 1,000 victories, studied the holographic projection of Sol system with 4 of his 6 eyes, while the other pair monitored the crew's autonomic responses. "Magnify the third planet," he ordered, his voice resonating through the kitten-lined chamber. The blue-green world expanded before him, clouds swirling across its surface in chaotic patterns, unprecedented water coverage, extreme geological instability, radiation levels that should preclude advanced life. Yet the intercepted transmissions suggested otherwise. Surveillance drones report artificial structures on all continents. "Admiral," Sub-Commander Katsura announced, her voice carrying the distinctive harmonic reserved for reporting anomalies. "They appear to have achieved rudimentary spaceflight approximately 70 planetary rotations ago." "Primitive," then Vostar concluded, mandibles clicking in what passed for amusement among the Khazari. "What of their combat capabilities?" The tactical officer interfaced directly with the ship's neural network, his exoskeleton pulsing with data exchange. "They war amongst themselves constantly, Admiral. Their weapons rely primarily on chemical propellants and crude fission. However," he hesitated, an unusual break in Khazari communication protocol. "Continue," Vostar ordered, all 6 eyes now fixed on the officer. "Their warfare is irrational. They employ tactics that sacrifice efficiency for unpredictability. They utilize inferior weapons platforms when superior options exist. Some warriors deliberately reduce their survival probability to retrieve fallen comrades." Vostar's upper carapace shifted in the subtle expression of skepticism. "Show me." The holographic display shifted to surveillance footage. Humans in desert camouflage running toward, not away from, an explosion. Military divers descending into ocean depths that crushed their primitive vessels for the slim chance of rescuing entrapped comrades. Firefighters entering burning structures with inadequate protection. They place unusual value on individual survival, the xenopsychologist offered from her monitoring station, yet paradoxically disregard personal safety in pursuit of collective goals. "A contradiction," Vostar noted. "Contradictions indicate evolutionary instability." The holographic display suddenly flashed red. Proximity alerts sounded throughout the command deck. "Scout vessel Inquisitive Hunter has experienced catastrophic system failure," Katsura reported, her exoskeleton pulsing with emergency pigmentation. "Crash trajectory places impact in the planet's northern mountain range." Vostar's decision was immediate. "Dispatch recovery drones. The indigenous species must not access our technology." The hours that followed brought increasingly disturbing reports. Indigenous emergency vessels had reached the crash site before Khazari recovery drones, despite treacherous mountain terrain. The crew, 3 Khazari scouts, were critically injured but alive. Standard protocol dictated immediate termination to prevent capture. Then came the footage that would transform galactic history. Humans, their fragile bodies struggling against high-altitude conditions, extracting Khazari survivors from the wreckage. A female human, her respiratory system visibly struggling against the toxic emissions from ruptured Khazari technology, performing emergency medical procedures on the scout commander. The scout's caustic hemolymph burned through the human's protective covering, yet she continued working, applying improvised pressure seals to the Khazari's fractured exoskeleton. "They're saving them," whispered Katsura, breaking communication protocol again. "Despite clear biohazard exposure, they cannot possibly understand what they're encountering," reasoned the xenopsychologist, her voiced harmonic patterns unsteady. "Perhaps they mistake our scouts for resources to be harvested." The medical officer's shell darkened with disquiet. "No, Admiral. Observe the human's technique. She's adapting trauma protocols for a physiology she cannot comprehend. She's improvising medical care for a species she's never encountered." Admiral Vostar, conqueror of 17 systems, stood motionless. In his 900 cycles, he had witnessed countless species fight, flee, or surrender. He had never seen one respond to potential threat with immediate medical assistance. What manner of species, he finally asked, sacrifices itself for predators? The bridge fell silent until his second-in-command ventured an answer that would echo through centuries of galactic discourse. Perhaps they don't see themselves as prey. The United Nations Security Council chamber buzzed with tension as Secretary General Amara Okafor adjusted her headset and faced the 7-foot-tall Khazari delegation. The aliens' exoskeletons gleamed under the chamber lights, iridescent patterns shifting across their carapaces in what human xenolinguists theorized were emotional indicators. "We welcome the representatives of the Khazari Empire," she began, her voice steady despite the historic gravity of the moment. Earth extends its hand in peaceful dialogue. The chief Khazari diplomat, designated as speaker for the fleet, tilted his angular head. The translation device at his thorax emitted a mechanical voice. "The dominant authority acknowledges your primitive world's greeting and will proceed with standard diplomatic classification protocols." Behind the Secretary General sat what the media had dubbed humanity's strangest delegation, not just politicians and military officers, but Dr. Elena Petrov, a Russian kindergarten teacher known for mediating playground conflicts; Kwame Nkosi, a Ghanaian comedian whose humor transcended cultural barriers; and Dr. Fatima Al-Zahrani, a grief counselor who specialized in cross-cultural trauma. The Khazari delegation's secondary appendages twitched in what intelligence analysts identified as confusion when these civilians were introduced. "Our negotiating team represents diverse human perspectives," explained Okafor. "We believe understanding requires multiple viewpoints." The aliens conferred in rapid clicks and whistles before the speaker responded. "Inefficient. Military and scientific expertise alone is sufficient for determining planetary status." Lieutenant Maya Santos, seated in the second row, focused intently on the alien's movements. Her synesthesia, once considered a neurological quirk, now revealed patterns in Khazari communication that standard analysis missed. While the translation devices conveyed words, she perceived the subtle harmonics and color-like patterns in their subvocal communications. When the translation system suddenly crashed during discussion of Earth's territorial boundaries, the chamber erupted in concerned murmurs. The Khazari representatives began emitting high-frequency sounds that the human delegation couldn't understand, their appendages shifting into what military advisors recognized as potential combat stances. Dr. Petrov, the kindergarten teacher, rose unexpectedly from her seat and approached the alien delegation. Security personnel tensed, but Secretary General Okafor raised a hand to hold them back. Petrov stopped 3 meters from the Khazari and, slowly mind-drinking from a cup, then pointed to the water vessels on the conference table. The lead alien paused, then mimicked her gesture with a 3-fingered limb. Petrov smiled and handed a water cup to the speaker, then pantomimed Earth's rotation around the sun, followed by drawing territorial boundaries with her hands. Remarkably, the Khazari began responding with their own gestures, creating an impromptu sign language that bridged the communication gap until technicians restored the translation systems. "Fascinating approach," the speaker for it. The fleet commented once translations resumed. "Your species employs nonverbal protocols familiar to juvenile development stages. Efficient adaptation." Santos leaned toward General Hidalgo beside her. "Sir, while they're speaking diplomatically, they're simultaneously transmitting tactical positions to their fleet. I can see the patterns in their subharmonics." Hidalgo nodded grimly. "Expected," briefed the Secretary General at the next recess. When Santos later reported her findings to Okafor and the core diplomatic team, she anticipated alarm. Instead, Ambassador Chen smiled thinly. "Good," he said, surprising her. "That means they take us seriously." The Khazari interpreter, stationed just outside the secure room with enhanced auditory capabilities, froze momentarily. His secondary brain processed this unexpected response against known diplomatic patterns of 17,000 conquered species. None had ever expected deception as standard procedure. None had ever welcomed it as confirmation of respect. He transmitted an encrypted message to Admiral Vostar. Anomaly in human response patterns. They anticipate tactical positioning during diplomatic exchange. Recommendation: reassess strategy. These humans operate with assumption of multi-level engagement. In the council chamber, Dr. Al-Zarani, the grief counselor, observed the Khazari's subtle posture changes. They're not just confused by us, she whispered to Nkosi, the comedian. They're experiencing cognitive dissonance. Their expected patterns aren't materializing. Nkosi nodded. Perfect time for a joke then. Nothing reveals cultural values like what makes them laugh. Or what they fear, Al-Zarani added quietly. Unacceptable. The Khazari High Commander's holographic projection towered over the negotiation table, his exoskeleton pulsing with crimson warning patterns. The dominance trials are sacred tradition. They cannot be modified. Secretary General Okafor remained unmoved. Yet we propose exactly that. Equal representation of challenges, some physical as your traditions demand, some cognitive as ours suggest. 3 weeks of tense negotiations had culminated in this impasse. The Khazari demanded their traditional combat trials to determine Earth's status in the galactic hierarchy. Humanity countered with a revolutionary proposal for a balanced competition. Behind closed doors, Earth's Defense Council had reached a unanimous conclusion. Accepting the Khazari's terms meant certain defeat, while refusing meant immediate war. Their only option was to change the game itself. We've analyzed every recorded trial in your provided historical archives, Dr. Vikram Patil explained, projecting comparative holograms. They systematically favor evolved traits specific to species from low-gravity, low-radiation environments, precisely the opposite of Earth's conditions. The High Commander's mandibles clicked in what humans now recognized as irritation. Your evolutionary disadvantages are not our concern. Admiral Vostar, unexpectedly present at the negotiations, studied the human delegates. The alternative? He asked, his translator conveying uncharacteristic curiosity. Ambassador Chen slid forward a data crystal. Our proposal: 5 Khazari trials, 5 human trials, and 5 co-developed challenges testing adaptability itself. Screens worldwide broadcast the tense exchange, with humanity collectively holding its breath. The selection process for Earth's champions had become a global phenomenon that transcended national boundaries for the first time in human history. In Nairobi, Kai Tenzin powered through the qualification course, his cutting-edge prosthetic legs propelling him over obstacles that had stymied competitors with biological limbs. The mountain rescue specialist had lost both legs in an avalanche, while saving a school group 3 years earlier. Your disability should disqualify you, remarked the Khazari observer. Kai smiled as he calibrated his neural interface. On Earth, we don't call adapting to challenges a disability. We call it evolution. At MIT, Dr. Isabella Reyes ran simultaneous quantum probability simulations, while a panel of judges presented increasingly impossible scenarios. When asked how she would escape a locked room with only a paperclip and shoelace, she provided 17 solutions, then added, "But I probably just convince my captor to release me." Most imprisonment scenarios fail due to psychological factors, not physical barriers. The Khazari observer's secondary appendages twitched in confusion. You create solutions to problems that cannot exist. No, Dr. Rice corrected, her eyes never leaving her calculations. I create solutions before problems exist. There's a difference. In Dubai, Commander Youssef Al-Hadid completed the combat assessment against drone opponents programmed with Khazari fighting techniques. Despite being outmatched in speed and strength, he systematically identified and exploited microscopic gaps in their attack patterns. You allowed yourself to be injured 16 times, noted the Khazari military attaché. Yes, Al-Hadid confirmed, bandaging a laceration. Each wound purchased data on your combat algorithms. An excellent exchange rate. The final 12 candidates gathered at the United Nations headquarters, their selection representing humanity's strategic gamble. Traditional military powers had largely failed to place representatives in the final team. Instead, the group consisted of adaptive specialists, cognitive innovators, and boundary crossers whose lives have forced them to develop unique perspectives. When the Khazari delegation inspected the human team's preparation area, they discovered walls covered with thousands of scenario flowcharts, contingency plans, and adaptation strategies. Many were deliberately positioned to be visible. Psychological warfare through information overload. "They're planning for failures we haven't even considered possible," reported the Khazari intelligence officer to Admiral Vostar, including their own deaths. Vostar studied the humans' preparations through all 6 eyes. Noticed the pattern. He instructed his subordinate. Their contingency plans assumed changing rules mid-game. "Dishonorable," the officer concluded. Perhaps Vostar's carapace shifted in the subtle expression that humans had begun to recognize as thoughtfulness. Or perhaps they understand something fundamental about survival that we've forgotten during 10,000 years of victory. Europa's frozen surface glittered under the harsh spotlights installed by the Khazari engineers. Jupiter loomed massive in the black sky, its swirling storms visible even from this distance. The pressure-domed arena built into the moon's ice crust hummed with energy fields designed to maintain survivable conditions for both species. Atmospheric composition stable. Radiation shielding at maximum, announced the Khazari technician. The deep ice retrieval trial will commence in 30 seconds. Kai Tenzin stood at the airlock, his specialized pressure suit incorporating his neural-linked prosthetics. The objective seemed simple. Descend through the borehole drilled into Europa's ice, retrieve the marker object from the subsurface ocean, and return before either competitor suffered system failure. The Khazari champion, Vrexkor, possessed natural advantages. An exoskeleton evolved to withstand crushing deep space pressures and biochemistry resistant to extreme temperature fluctuations. Your technology will fail at approximately 2.7 kilometers, Vrexkor stated matter-of-factly, mandibles clicking. Your biological components will cease functioning shortly thereafter. Kai adjusted his suit connections. Probably. But I grew up rescuing climbers from the Himalayas. Death predictions don't impress me much. The warning klaxon sounded, and both competitors launched into the narrow ice shaft. The Khazari took an immediate lead, his natural propulsion systems outpacing Kai's mechanical thrusters. In the observation chamber, Dr. Rice tracked the telemetry with narrowed eyes. He's modifying his descent pattern, she noted to Commander Al-Hadid. That's not standard Khazari procedure. They're learning, Al-Hadid replied grimly. At the 2.5-kilometer mark, warning lights flashed across Kai's helmet display. Ice pressure threatened to crush his equipment, and temperature regulators struggled against the intense cold. Rather than slowing as the Khazari expected, Kai detached components of his prosthetic legs, reconfiguring them into a pressure redistribution framework that wrapped around his torso. "What is he doing?" demanded the Khazari observer. Dr. Rice smiled thinly. "Mountain rescue innovation. When you can't bring enough equipment, you repurpose what you have." Kai's makeshift modification allowed him to descend faster as Vrexkor slowed, the alien's confidence in his inevitable victory causing him to conserve energy. When both reached the submerged marker, a beacon pulsing in the dark European ocean, they were nearly matched. The ascent became the true challenge. Vrexkor's powerful natural propulsion gave him the advantage in the water, but once they reached the ice shaft again, Kai deployed his final adaptation. He withdrew specialized pitons from his suit compartments, tools designed for ice climbing Earth's most treacherous glaciers, and began a rapid vertical ascent that bypassed the thrusters entirely. "Illegal modification," protested the Khazari judge. "Review the rules," countered the human representative. "All equipment carried at trial start is permissible. The rules specify no restrictions on reconfiguration." Kai emerged from the borehole 4 minutes before his competitor, the marker clutched in his frost-covered glove, his remaining biological leg nearly numb from cold. "Impossible," whispered Vrexkor upon his emergence, his exoskeleton vibrating with what humans had learned to recognize as shock. "Your equipment specifications showed failure at those depths." "They did fail," Kai replied, removing his helmet to reveal a face lined with pain and stubborn determination. "I just kept going anyway." The combat trial the following day matched Commander Al-Hadid against Mekthar, the Khazari Empire's most decorated duelist. The rules permitted any non-projectile weapon. Mekthar selected a traditional nerve disruptor staff, while Al-Hadid chose a simple carbon fiber beacon. Within minutes, the human was bleeding from 6 precision strikes. The Khazari audience clicked in satisfaction, while the human observation team maintained unsettling silence. "Your champion is being systematically dismantled," the Khazari High Commander noted to Secretary General Okafor. "Concession would preserve his life." "Watch his eyes," Okafor replied cryptically. As the battle continued, observers noticed a pattern. Each injury Al-Hadid sustained occurred while he was studying a different section of his opponent's exoskeleton. By the 12th minute, bleeding from over a dozen wounds, the commander suddenly altered his fighting style. His next strike targeted a minuscule seam where Mekthar's secondary breathing apparatus connected to his thoracic plates, a vulnerability no non-Khazari had ever identified, much less exploited. Mekthar collapsed, his nervous system temporarily paralyzed. "How?" demanded the stunned Khazari medical officer rushing to revive their champion. Al-Hadid, barely standing and requiring immediate medical attention himself, managed a pained smile. "You telegraph your vulnerabilities when you protect them. I just needed enough data points to confirm my hypothesis." Admiral Vostar, watching from the shadows, transmitted a priority message to his fleet. Tactical alert. Humans weaponize their own injuries as information-gathering opportunities. Standard combat protocols compromised. Sofia Mendoza sprayed luminescent paint across the abandoned lunar base Artemis wall, her movements fluid despite the cumbersome EVA suit. The Colombian street artist had never expected to become humanity's most unlikely spy, yet here she was, creating a stunning mural of Earth visible through the dome's viewport. A deliberate distraction. "Package is moving," whispered the voice in her helmet. 30 seconds. She added final touches to her artwork as the Khazari diplomatic contingent approached for their scheduled tour of humanity's first permanent lunar settlement. Their route had been carefully calculated to pass her location precisely when the second phase of Operation Looking Glass activated. The Khazari delegation paused, all 6 eyes of each representative focusing on her vibrant creation. Perfect. At that exact moment, 3 kilometers away, a docking collar on the Khazari shuttle momentarily depressurized during a routine maintenance error. Emergency protocols activated, recalling all non-essential personnel to their vessel. In the confusion, with facial recognition systems struggling to differentiate between similarly suited humans, Sophia slipped aboard. Meanwhile, on Earth, the Khazari's elite infiltration unit, the Shadow Carapace, breached the outer perimeter of UNSC headquarters with ease. Their chameleonic exoskeletons bent light around them, rendering them nearly invisible to standard security measures. Primitive defenses, Sub-Commander Turvex communicated through encrypted bioelectric pulses. Proceed to objective. Central data repository. The 4 infiltrators moved silently through the complex, their movements synchronized with security camera sweeps. They reached the central server room without triggering a single alarm, exactly as their tactical simulations had predicted. The lead infiltrator interfaced with the security console, bristling with confidence. The encryption system required a security key and password. The screen prompted, "Enter favorite childhood cartoon character." The infiltrator froze. The concept made no sense. Favorite, childhood, cartoon. Each term required cultural context the Khazari lacked. Security anomaly, he transmitted to his team. Human authentication appears to incorporate subjective emotional parameters. They bypassed this system only to encounter another prompt. How would you feel if your best friend betrayed you? Describe in 5 to 7 words. Emotional response verification. The infiltration team's confusion cascaded through their neural link. Their extensive training had prepared them for biometric scanners, retinal patterns, even DNA verification, but not questions about hypothetical feelings. Sophia had 19 minutes before the shuttle returned to the main vessel. Her photographic memory, the reason she'd been selected despite zero military training, captured every detail of the Khazari ship's layout as she moved through maintenance passages too small for the larger aliens to patrol regularly. When she reached the central data core, she didn't attempt to hack it, an impossible task given the biological components of Khazari technology. Instead, she executed what Operation Director Rice had called the universal bypass. She triggered the fire suppression system. As emergency protocols activated, the data core initiated standard backup procedures, temporarily connecting to the fleet's shared network. Sophia attached her specialized drive to an external diagnostic port, the alien equivalent of a USB connection, and let it passively record the data stream for 17 seconds before disconnecting. Then came the most audacious part of her mission. Rather than attempting to sneak back out, she deliberately triggered a minor technical malfunction in the shuttle's galley, causing a series of non-dangerous, but increasingly absurd failures that culminated in all the food dispensers simultaneously activating. In the ensuing confusion, with Khazari crew members covered in alien nutritional gels, she slipped back to the human delegation, her absence attributed to a miscommunication about tour assignments. The data Sophia returned with changed everything. Dr. Rice analyzed the partial fleet communications and discovered the Khazari High Command's true plan. Regardless of the trial outcomes, Earth was scheduled for biological reconfiguration, their euphemism for planetary sterilization. More disturbing were the predictive models stored in the Khazari military database. Their strategic AIs had run billions of simulations on human-Khazari interactions extending centuries into the future. Every scenario ended the same way. Humans eventually outwitting, outfighting, or out-adapting their conquerors. They're afraid of us, Ambassador Chen concluded during the emergency council meeting. Not of our current capabilities, but our potential. Not just afraid, Dr. Rice corrected, highlighting a particular data cluster. They're terrified. According to their own projections, even if they completely destroyed Earth, but missed just one human colony ship, we'd eventually rebuild and overtake them through sheer adaptability. Lieutenant Santos studied the translation of a message from Admiral Vostar to the Khazari High Command. The humans must not be evaluated as a current threat, but as a mathematical inevitability. Their extinction now is the only solution. So we've won by losing more creatively than they anticipated, General Hidalgo said grimly. That's when they become most dangerous. No, Sophia interjected, surprising the military and political leaders who had largely ignored the artist's presence. That's when they become predictable. They can only imagine one response to fear. Sophia projected an image onto the briefing room wall, a stylized mural of a Khazari and human standing together. I tagged their shuttle with this before leaving. Small enough to go unnoticed by them, but our response doesn't have to be extinction. We need to show them a different way. Kelvac, Xenobiologist 3rd rank, violated 17 Imperial protocols by initiating an unauthorized communication with the human medical team. His research vessel orbited Europa at a discrete distance from the main Khazari fleet, ostensibly collecting environmental data. In reality, the samples that filled his laboratory told a different story. Your transmission is untraceable, he confirmed, carapace vibrating with the Khazari equivalent of anxiety. Dr. Aisha Rahman nodded on the secure quantum channel. Completely. Now explain why you contacted us. Kelvac projected a hologram, a comparative analysis of environmental tolerances for 17 spacefaring species alongside humans. This data must reach your leaders immediately. Your planet. He struggled with concepts alien to Khazari thought. Your Earth is classified as a Class 10 death world. I don't understand, Raman replied. Death world. Galactic classification for planets that should not produce sentient life. His secondary appendages twitched with suppressed agitation. Your gravity is 31% higher than standard habitability metrics. Your oxygen atmosphere is combustible by galactic norms. Your temperature variations, radiation levels, and pathogen diversity. He paused. No known spacefaring species evolved under such conditions. He transmitted detailed files, atmospheric compositions of homeworlds for every species in the Khazari Empire. Each showed remarkably similar parameters, varying only slightly from the galactic mean. Earth was a radical outlier on every metric. But what does this mean for the trials? Raman asked. The trials are irrelevant. The High Command has already decided Earth's fate. Kelvac's translator struggled with his next words. But they do not understand what they face. Humans are wrong. Biologically impossible. You consume substances that would kill most species for pleasure. Your radiation tolerance exceeds safety parameters by magnitudes. Your immune systems constantly wage wars that would overwhelm other species. He projected a new hologram, human cellular structure compared to Khazari. Your ability to regenerate from injuries is unprecedented. Your neural plasticity defies evolutionary models. And this, he highlighted a section of human DNA, suggests your species deliberately modified toxic substances into digestible nutrition through your history. Raman stared at the data, professional interest overriding immediate concerns. Capsaicin. You mean spicy food. You weaponized plant defense chemicals into culinary experiences. Kelvac's voice carried unmistakable horror. No other species does this. It indicates fundamental differences in how humans process pain and pleasure. Dr. Rice assembled the human delegation within the hour. This changes everything, she announced, projecting Kelvac's data. We're not just different. We're terrifying by galactic standards. Leverage, Commander Al-Hadid said immediately. Psychological advantage. Rice nodded. Exactly. We need a demonstration. The plan came together rapidly. During the next scheduled joint observation session, the human team executed what they termed Operation Death World. It began subtly. Kai casually consumed a meal containing ghost peppers, demonstrating no discomfort while explaining Earth's competitive eating challenges. Dr. Liu deliberately broke and reset her own finger to demonstrate human medical techniques, describing battlefield surgeries performed without anesthesia. Raman projected holographic images of Earth's most extreme environments, from volcano divers to free climbers scaling sheer cliffs without equipment. The Khazari observers' exoskeletons pulsed with increasing distress patterns. The final demonstration came when Commander Al-Hadid displayed training footage of human special forces, soldiers running until collapse, swimming in ice-covered waters, surviving in desert conditions with minimal equipment. Standard training, he explained casually. Nothing special. The Khazari military attache's translator emitted staccato fragments as his natural language broke down in agitation. Your warriors deliberately subject themselves to near-death conditions, routinely. Of course, Al-Hadid replied. How else would we prepare for actual combat? Admiral Vostar received the observation reports with increasing concern. The evidence was undeniable. Humans didn't just visit death worlds. They evolved on one. Their entire biology, psychology, and civilization developed under conditions that should have precluded complex life entirely. They don't fear pain like we do, his chief medical officer explained. Their nervous systems process it differently. They voluntarily engage with stimuli that trigger avoidance reflexes in all other known species. Vostar reviewed the calculations again. The sterilization fleet was already en route from the Empire's core systems, but these new variables hadn't been factored into their strategic models. A species that evolved on a death world. He mused, would logically design weapons specifically calibrated to Deathworld conditions. His tactical officer's exoskeleton paled. Our ships are optimized for standard atmospheric engagement. If human weapons are designed for their extreme planetary conditions, then our attack fleet is more vulnerable than anticipated, Vostar concluded. And this assumes humans fight conventionally at all. The intelligence officer displayed the final piece of disturbing evidence, security footage from the human preparation areas, showing Dr. Rice and her team celebrating their successful psychological operation with a traditional Earth victory ritual, champagne. They deliberately consume neurotoxins that impair cognitive function, the officer reported. For pleasure, during strategic planning sessions. Admiral Vostar's decision crystallized. He opened a secure channel to the human diplomatic delegation. For the first time in the history of the Khazari Empire, an admiral would violate high command protocols. The humans must be warned, he told his stunned bridge crew, not for their sake, but for ours. Sterilization fleet will arrive in 48 Earth hours. Admiral Vostar projected the tactical display in the secure bunker beneath Europa's human compound. 17 capital ships carrying sufficient firepower to render your planet uninhabitable. Secretary General Okafor studied the alien's body language, noting the unfamiliar positioning of his primary appendages. Lieutenant Santos had briefed her on this particular posture, the Khazari equivalent of profound internal conflict. Why warn us? Okafor asked directly. You violate your empire's most sacred protocols by being here. Vostar's exoskeleton shifted colors, patterns rippling across its surface. In 900 cycles, I have conquered 17 worlds. None resisted effectively. None adapted meaningfully. His translator paused, struggling with concepts unfamiliar to Khazari language. Your species fascinates me. You should not exist, yet you thrive. You should fear us, yet you engage with curiosity. Not just curiosity, Dr. Rice interjected. Protocol Prometheus. At her signal, technicians activated a device in the center of the room. A holographic interface displayed a countdown timer alongside a global network map showing thousands of transmission nodes pulsing in synchronization. What is this? Demanded Vostar. Insurance, Commander El-Hadid explained. For the past week, we've been uploading data packets to every communication satellite in Sol system. When this timer reaches 0, they'll transmit simultaneously through the Khazari communication network to every subjugated species in your empire. Impossible. Vostar's secondary appendages twitched. Our network has biological security protocols, which we bypassed using samples from your crashed scout ship, Sofia Mendoza said, stepping forward unexpectedly. Your biodigital interfaces are impressive but predictable. The package contained 3 elements: detailed scans of Khazari technology showing critical vulnerabilities, tactical assessments of Imperial fleet movements revealing thinly defended supply lines, and most devastating, the concept of asymmetric warfare. Your empire conquers through overwhelming force, Dr. Rice explained. But humans specialize in achieving victory despite material disadvantages. We've compiled 5,000 years of guerrilla warfare tactics, resistance movements, and insurgency strategies, all translated into formats accessible to every species in your empire. Vostar's carapace darkened in the Khazari expression of profound alarm. You would trigger galaxy-wide rebellion even as your own world faces extinction. We call it a legacy, Okafor replied steadily. If we cannot survive, we ensure our ideas do. For 13 seconds, an eternity in Khazari decision-making, Admiral Vostar remained motionless. Then he connected to his neural interface and transmitted a series of encrypted commands. I have locked down all communication channels from my fleet, he announced, and initiated emergency protocols to delay the sterilization fleet. His exoskeleton shifted to a pattern no human had observed before. Your species has a concept we lack. You call it conscience. I find myself infected by it. 17 hours later, Europa's ice crust trembled as Khazari ships maneuvered into defensive positions. The Imperial response to Vostar's rebellion had been swift. 3 battle cruisers dispatched to eliminate the rogue admiral and continue with Earth's destruction. In the hastily established Joint Command Center, human and Khazari officers worked side by side, an alliance unprecedented in galactic history. "Your vessels are outgunned 5-1, Al-Hadid noted, studying battle projections. "Conventional analysis is correct," Vostar acknowledged. "But your tactical concepts suggest alternatives to direct confrontation." Dr. Rice projected historical naval battle diagrams from Earth's age of sail. Before powered vessels, Earth navies relied on wind patterns and environmental factors to overcome superior forces. Space has its equivalent conditions: gravity wells, radiation fields, debris patterns. The resulting battle plan merged Khazari technical precision with human creative adaptability. Vostar's ships would lure the Imperial vessels into Jupiter's complex gravitational field, where human design maneuvers, adapted from ancient naval warfare Earth's admirals had used against superior forces, would negate the enemy's firepower advantage. As the first Imperial vessels appeared at the edge of the Jovian system, Kai Tenzin approached Vostar with an unexpected question. "Your ships have biomechanical interfaces only Khazari can operate. What would happen if a human tried to connect?" "Neural overflow," Vostar replied immediately. "Probable cerebral damage." Kai smiled grimly. "But potentially functional connection before that damage occurs." "Theoretically, yes, but..." Vostar's translator caught up with Kai's implication. "You would sacrifice neural function for temporary control." "On Earth," Kai replied, adjusting his prosthetics, "we have a concept called kamikaze. Sometimes, one life can change the course of history." Dr. Rahman intervened forcefully. "Absolutely not. There's another way." She displayed a hastily constructed neural interface adapter. "This should buffer the connection enough to prevent immediate brain damage. A few minutes of control, at most." Kai nodded. "That's all we'll need for Operation Black Sail." As the battle commenced, Admiral Vostar observed something he had never witnessed in 9 centuries of warfare: humans executing tactics designed to protect their Khazari allies rather than merely preserving themselves. The Khazari crew members serving under him registered similar confusion when human technicians prioritized life support repairs on sections housing Khazari personnel. They fight not just for survival, Vostar realized, but for possibility. Jupiter's storms reflected the chaos unfolding in its orbit. The battle had raged for 7 hours, defying all conventional tactical models. 3 Imperial heavy cruisers against Vostar's 2 light cruisers and 4 human vessels retrofitted with Khazari shield technology should have ended in swift Imperial victory. Instead, the battlefield had transformed into something unprecedented in galactic warfare. "Execute Pattern Nelson 6, Commander Al-Hadid ordered from the Joint Command Center, blood seeping through bandages where debris had struck him during the last attack." Human vessels moved in formations incomprehensible to Imperial tacticians, breaking lines, sacrificing optimal firing positions to protect allies, and using Jupiter's radiation belts to mask approach vectors. On the lead Imperial vessel, High Commander Zexkor raged at his tactical officers. "How are they anticipating our attack patterns? Our neural-linked targeting systems should be impenetrable." The answer arrived moments later, when a strange transmission cut through Imperial encryption. Music, Earth classical compositions, transmitted directly into the biodigital interfaces of the Imperial fleet. The complex harmonics, which Kelvak had discovered disrupted Khazari neural pathways, created cascading errors in their targeting systems. "The humans found our resonance weakness," the Imperial weapons officer reported in alarm. "Targeting efficiency reduced 60%. In the chaos, Kai Tenzin executed the final phase of Operation Black Sail. Using Dr. Rahman's neural interface adapter, he connected to a captured Khazari scout ship's controls. The pain was immediate and excruciating as alien neural patterns flooded his consciousness, but he held on, piloting the vessel directly toward the Imperial flagship's main sensor array. Impact in 15 seconds, he reported through gritted teeth, blood trickling from his nose. The aperture is opening to fire their main weapon. Perfect timing. Dr. Rice watched the tactical display with clenched fists. Kai, the adapter's failing. Your neural patterns are destabilizing. Just need 10 more seconds, he gasped. The scout ship slipped through the momentary vulnerability in the flagship's defensive screen, detonating precisely as the main weapon charged. The resulting cascade failure rippled through the Imperial command systems. In that critical moment, Vostar's vessels executed a perfect pincer movement, another human naval tactic adapted for space warfare, catching the Imperial flagship between concentrated fire. High Commander, Vostar transmitted on an open channel. Your tactical position is untenable. Your ships are damaged beyond effective combat capability. Surrender. The response came not as expected. Detonation protocols initiated. Imperial vessels will self-destruct rather than surrender to primitives and traitors. Sofia Mendoza, monitoring communication channels, suddenly straightened. Admiral, I'm detecting transmissions from within the Imperial vessels, not from command, but from lower decks. Multiple signatures. Lieutenant Santos analyzed the patterns. Their surrender requests, from engineering crews, medical personnel, even tactical officers. A hierarchy is fracturing, Vostar realized. Conscience has spread. The battle ended not with Earth's destruction or salvation, but something no predictive model had calculated: evolution. 7,000 Khazari crew members defected from Imperial command, requesting asylum with Vostar's faction. The High Commander and his most loyal officers maintained their suicide pact, but the majority chose a different path. 1 month later, the Galactic Council convened for the first time in the United Nations General Assembly Hall. Representatives from 27 formerly subjugated species joined human and Khazari delegates in creating a structure unlike any before, part Earth-inspired democratic body, part Khazari meritocracy, with entirely new elements contributed by liberated civilizations. Admiral Vostar, now bearing a human-designed prosthetic arm after injuries sustained in the battle, addressed the historic gathering. His translator had been recalibrated to convey the subtle emotional harmonics of Khazari speech. The Empire conquered the galaxy because we feared it, he began, his remaining natural appendages moving in formal ceremonial patterns. We believed only dominance ensured survival, but humans conquered their own world by embracing its dangers, by adapting rather than controlling. He gestured toward Kai Tenzin, who had survived but would require ongoing neural regeneration therapy. Their capacity for self-sacrifice extends beyond their own species. This marks the true divergence from Imperial philosophy. Dr. Reyes presented the Council with the cornerstone of the new Galactic Charter: mutual adaptation. Each species would contribute unique evolutionary perspectives to shared challenges. Earth would establish embassy worlds where environments could be tailored to visitor physiology, while other species would develop technologies to help humans navigate environments toxic to their biology. The Colombian street artist who had sparked the rebellion with her infiltration now traveled between worlds, creating massive public murals depicting the diverse species united by choice rather than conquest. Her work on New Khazari depicted Admiral Vostar and Secretary General Okafor standing together, with the phrase "adaptation through cooperation" rendered in both human and Khazari script. In the final council session, a junior delegate asked Vostar to explain his historic decision to betray 9,000 years of imperial doctrine. He projected a series of images: Earth's hurricanes and volcanoes, children playing near danger, hospitals where the gravely injured recovered, astronauts volunteering for missions with minimal survival probability. We feared humans initially for their physical capabilities, he explained, then for their tactical adaptability. But we should have feared them most for their capacity to change not just themselves, but us. The galaxy feared us, but we were right to fear the humans, not for their capacity for violence, but for their capacity for transformation. As delegates departed for their homeworlds, a new galactic calendar was established. It marked first contact with humanity as year zero of the Age of Adaptation, the era when the galaxy discovered that evolution continued not through dominance, but through unexpected connection.